Hey guys, Team Trinity Dragon here. Today I'm bringing you a Draconic Kaiser Vermilion the Blood deck list. And we're going to just jump right into the grade 3s. So first off, we play 4 copies of Draconic Kaiser Vermilion the Blood. The Blood is the thing you're always going to want to be riding into, and there are no real other targets you want to be playing as your main grade 3. In this deck you have a few ways to search this. By a few, I mean just the grade 3 searcher of Narukami. However, this deck draws so much that you won't even have to worry about trying to find it. Most likely you'll just open with it. So, for those who don't know, the Blood has 2 active effects. One is once per turn, the other is not. I'll explain the first one. Once per turn, you can counterblast one. Put a card from your hand into the soul, and that's the cost. And then onto the actual effect. Until the end of the turn, this gets a +5 and an extra drive. And when it would attack, it battles everything in the opponent's front row, meaning they have to guard separately for everything they have. That's saying they want to guard. And if you happen to put the original Draconic Kaiser Vermilion into the soul, you get an extra +10 and a crit. Now the other act ability is also on Vanguard, and you soul blast a card with Kaiser in its name specifically. And he gets an extra, and the Blood gets an extra drive until the end of the turn. However, you take a damage for the Kaiser, for as many Kaisers as you soul blasted. Since that's not once per turn, you can use it multiple times over, and so you have the Blood, and this is another Kaiser in the soul. So soul blast, extra drive. You have another Kaiser in the soul, soul blast, you get extra drive. But then you would take 2 damage during the end phase. Next, I mentioned it earlier, but we play 4 copies of the original Draconic Kaiser Vermilion. You want to play as many Kaiser names as possible, so that way you can max out the amount of drive checks you get. You're never going to be riding into this guy, and if you are, you're losing that game. I'm just being honest. If you have to ride into this guy, you're losing that game. Because you should only ever be riding into the Blood. Now, I'll explain what he does just in case you do find yourself in a situation where you need to ride into him. Act Vanguard once per turn, counterblast 2, he gets +5 and a crit until the end of the turn. If there are 2 or more rear guards in your opponent's front row, instead of a crit, you'd allow this unit to attack the entire front row. Now, this card is really mid compared to the Blood, so again, we just use it to throw. We just use the Blood to throw this card into the soul to get its full benefits. That's all we used Vermilion for, or Stride Fodder, I guess. Anyways, on to the next grade 3. Now, here's the new promo that just released. That's why I built the deck, because I saw that this card might just bring this deck to well, just better levels of play. We're playing 4 copies of the brand new promo Draconic Kaiser Crimson. Now, I haven't seen any deck lists of Vermilion out yet, so I'm assuming no one really knows what this guy does or that he's even real. So first, his first effect is an auto drop zone effect. When your Vanguard with Kaiser in his card name is attacked or attacks a grade 3 or greater Vanguard, you counterblast 1 and call this unit to an open front row. Or all of your Vanguards get +10,000 until the end of that battle. So that means you're able to use this as practically extra guarding from the drop zone, but at a cost of counterblast. Or you can call it back to the rear guard to swing more. Its second effect, on the rear guard, when a card is put into your trigger zone during your end phase, if you have a Vanguard with Kaiser in its card name, you soul blast and retire this unit. You put that card into your you put the card You put the card from the trigger zone into the drop. So you just negate the damage. But also it's another card with Kaiser in its card name, so that means we can use the Blood's second effect to Soul Blast it to get max drive checks. And also we can call it back to save ourselves from the whole taking damage during the end phase part of the Blood's effect. So I would recommend playing 4 of this if you plan to build this deck. It's really cheap right now, but if this deck somehow gets like a lot better, like competitively, I would recommend picking this up ASAP. Alright, that's all for the main grade 3s. Now on to the grade 2s. So first, the only 4 we have is 4 copies of Spark Arrow Dragon. Spark Arrow Dragon is your superior rider. So, for those who don't know, Spark Arrow Dragon has one act ability on the rear guard, where if you have a Vanguard with Kaiser in its card name, you Soul Blast 1 and retire this unit. You search your deck for up to 1 card with Kaiser in its card name, and you ride it as stand. You shuffle your deck until the end of this turn. When your opponent's rear guard would be retired, you bind it instead of retiring. Now, this doesn't have a once per turn thing on it, because, well, if it just had the pink once per turn thing up on top, that means you'd still be able to use it multiple times over in that same turn. But at the end of it, it does state that you can only use the effect of the same named, like a card with the same name as this effect, you can only use once per turn. So you can't just go Spark Arrow, Superior Ride, Spark Arrow, Superior Ride, Spark Arrow, Superior Ride to have infinite cards in hand, which sucks, but that's life. You will have a Superior Ride almost every turn, as long as you're playing your hand or deck right. For other grade 2s we play 2 copies of Venusaur Eradicator Cello. What Cello does on Vanguard or Rearguard, you counterblast 1 and choose a column. You bind the unit. You choose a column on your opponent's side of the field, and you bind the unit in the front row. Then you push the back row unit up to the front row in the same column. Now on Rearguard once per turn, at the end of the battle, your Vanguard attacked. If your opponent has no front row rear guards, you counterblast 1 to stand him. We're just using him for the restand. I honestly find myself just either using him as the grade 2 ride, because the other grade 2s in this deck are kind of lacklusting. We're actually only playing 8 grade 2s because our grade 2 game is really, really kind of lame. We're mainly focusing all of our attention on the grade 3 turn. But that's Cello. Almost every Narukami deck wants to play Cello. Next, we're playing 1 Bolt Pike Dragon. It's a grade 2 with 12,000 power and 10,000 shield. Now, continuous Vanguard and Rearguard. If your opponent has sorry, kind of just tired. But if your opponent's front row has 2 rear guards, he can't attack. So what you're doing with this guy usually is saving him for your grade 3 turn, calling him to an Excel, and then swinging with Vermilion, clearing the front row, and then you swing with him. The last grade 2 we play in this deck is Supreme Army Eradicator Zuiton. He's here to go into the soul and draw, because specifically, we're going to ignore the first effect, and we're just going to look at the second, which is on Rearguard at the end of the battle. He attacked a Vanguard. If the opponent's front row has no rear guards, he goes into the soul, and you get to draw a card. So he's just there for the more soul, because this deck runs out of resources really quickly, and he nets you a card. So pretty good. Now, on to the grade 1s. First, we play 4 copies of Thunder Valley Dragon. Thunder Valley is the searcher of this deck. Just like how Vanquisher has Chain Bolt, how Eradicator has New Skew. This is the Searcher. You play 4 because he, 1, searches you more copies of the original Vermilion, so you'll have more to put into the soul. And he also searches you copies of Spark Arrow Dragon to have more in your hand. Now, at the cost of the ad off the top 5, it's just a discard, which isn't bad because that means we get to ditch this to the drop zone to call it back later. Now he has another ability on rear guard, not Van. If your Vanguard hit that turn, he gets +5, which is really good. But 4 of him, definitely crucial. Next, for other grade 1s we play, we're playing 4 copies of Mighty Bolt Dragoon. Mighty Bolt's just the standard grade 3 searcher for Narukami. Every Narukami deck wants to at least play 1 of it. I don't know how every other deck has its ratios, but I play 4 of Mighty Bolt. Because, like I said, he's just a standard grade 3 searcher. So check top 5, grab a grade 3. If you do, discard a card. If you don't, just shuffle those cards back. And his special gimmicky effect for Narukami is during your turn, if any person's unit was bound that turn, he gained +5. So like I said, just standard grade 3 searcher with the Dex gimmick. All right, on to more grade 1s. Next we play 2 copies of Eradicator Demolition Dragon. Just like with Zuiton, he's here to go into the soul, bind a card as well as draw. Your early game you're using him for the draws, but later game you will be putting him into soul, so you're able to use more copies of Draconic Kaiser Crimson to save yourself from more damage. And finally, for the grade 1s, we have actually, there's one more grade 1 after this. I apologize. Next, we have 2 copies of Rising Phoenix. Now, Rising Phoenix has a drop zone effect where if, when an opponent's rear guard is bound, you get to instantly call this guy back from the drop zone, and then he gains 3 till the end of the turn. So say you're swinging with Vermilion, and this guy, you have this in drop, and you use Spark Arrow that turn, so your opponent's rear guards get bound because that's how Spark Arrow worked. So you'd call it back because stuff was bound, and he gets +3. So pretty good. I would recommend playing it. Maybe bump it up to 3, but I feel like 2 feels good. Play with the ratios however you want. Last, we play Elementary Sanctitude because everyone's playing it. It's really good in premium because it's just a free PG on the opponent's stride turn. Yeah, no, you just really want to play this. It is a Sentinel, so that means you will only be able to play 3 other Sentinels, like draw PGs, but we'll get to that when we get to that. That's all for the grade 1s. Now on to the triggers. First, we play 4 copies of the grade 3 heal Blitz Knuckle Dragon. This is the heal Guardian. So that means he has 2 effects, which read, when it's one of the guard circle from hand, if you did not read grade 3 or greater this fight, you perform one of the following. You either choose one of your vanguards and it gets +10, or choose one of your opponent's units and it gets -double crit till the end of the turn. Now, his second effect that no one really uses, but it's there. When it's placed on rear guard from hand, if your damage zone has no cards, put the top card of your deck into your damage zone. So that means if you've been damage denied for the fight, you can call this to acquire some damage. Outside of that, it's a heal trigger, and it's a grade 3, so that means we can use that stride fodder. Next, we play 4 copies of Dragon Dancer Paulina. Dragon Dancer Paulina is the Narukami into soul crit, where at the generation break of 1, when your Vanguard attacks, you throw it into the soul, you draw a card, and your Vanguard gets +10. So it's just simple. It's a crit. It has the crit gives your whatever unit you want +10 and a crit, and shield is 15. So it's just like one of the brand new. It's just like one of the V era. Like it has V era stats for triggers, but it has a G era more effect. But it's really good. Recommend 4 of it. For other things we play 4 copies of the Stride Crit. Just generic Narukami thing you want to be playing. The Stride Crit, when in the hand, when you're paying the cost for a Stride, this counts as grade 3. Just like with Paulina, it has V era stats for triggers, like with their shield and the power they boost by. So it's just good. I just recommend playing. I like the 8 crit setup specifically because that means you have more chance for damage. I see people using fronts, but more damage is always better in my opinion. Next, we play 3 copies of Wyvern Strike Guard Guild, because it's just a draw PG. It's a PG, and if you wield it for a trigger, you get a draw. So draws are good in this deck. Just keep in mind you will deck out eventually, which is not good. But hey, just kill your opponent before that happens. Lastly, for the triggers, we do play the Drag Veda, standard Dragon Empire over trigger, because the resend is really good because we get more drive checks that way. So it's just a 50k shield. Everyone's playing an over trigger. It's standard now. Don't bother not playing one, because you're gonna be sad when someone else does it to you. Yeah. And then for the starter, we play Spark Kid Dragoon. You can use any starter. I just like this one because he looks more fun. Barrett fits my personality more, but I like Spark Kid because Naoki used it in the anime. So I just really liked it. All right, on to the G Zone. Now this is where the deck list takes a turn for probably the worst, because technically this G Zone's incomplete. However, I'm still gonna show it off to y'all so you can see, so you can have a basic of a Narukami G Zone. Again, it's not complete, but it's functional. So first, we have 3 copies of Draconic Vanquisher, Conquering Supreme Dragon Draconic Vanquisher VMAX. On Vanguard, Generation Break of 3, Thunderstrike of 5. Thunderstrike is the amount of cards in the opponent's bind zone. So for this, you'd have to have 5 cards in the opponent's bind zone to use the effect. But counter boss of 2 as well. At the end of battle he attacked, he just instantly pings your opponent a damage. So that means even if they're on 5, you can just kill with Vanquisher, with the VMAX. So at least one of him is what I'd recommend playing, but because you're only ever going to see like the opportunity to use one. But I'm playing 3 just to fill my G Zone out. Next we have just some kind of, this is Conquering Supreme Dragon Conquest Fulgurate. No one knows this guy. His Thunderstrike is an X, which is a variable. I used to think him at 10, but no, that's just part of the, it's just a variable. By turning a card from the G Zone face up and ditching a card from the hand, choose up as many units your opponent has on field up to the number of face-up cards in your G Zone you have, and retire, then bind those units. Then, for if your opponent has 7 cards in their bind zone, he gets an extra drive, and if they have 10, he gets an extra crit. So this is a more later game stage card. We play 2 of it because, well, filling up the G zone, and you usually just turn himself back face up. Next, for actual strides, we have what's become more mainstream and very expensive, Concrete Supreme Dragon Exterminate. Everyone knows this card by now, I hope at least. But when he's placed on the Vanguard, Soul Blast 1 and draw for every open front row your opponent has. Then act once per turn, counter West 1, and your entire front row gets plus 10 for each open front row your opponent has. You want to be playing this in the deck. I don't find myself going into it as often because I like to stay on my on the blood, but there's situations where it would have won me the game, and I just didn't see the opportunity to use it. So I'd recommend playing at least 2 of this. We're gonna go on to some G guards now. First, we have 3 copies of Bulwark, because Bulwark, it is a pretty good card. It is the out to Steam Maiden, but we're probably not going to be seeing Steam Maiden in the meta. But then again, I have no clue what the meta looks like now. He has a Thunder Strike ability at 3, where he gets plus 10,000, I think. Yeah, plus 10,000 shield. And then auto, when he's retired from the guard circle, for every 4 cards in the opponent's bind zone, you is it bind or retire? When he's retired from guard circle, for every 4 cards in the opponent's bind zone, you take as many as you can rest rear guards, for every 4 cards at least, in the bind zone that your opponent has, and then you retire those rest units. So he's good. Would recommend it. Next, we have 2 copies of Sky Guardian Supreme Dragon Counteract Dragon. He is the G guard that makes your opponent make a choice of if they want to bind or not to bind. That is the question. Because if they bind 1, if they choose not to bind 1, he gets plus 10 shield, and if they choose not to bind 2, he gets another plus 10. So it can go up to usually a 47k guard, because no one wants to bind already units that haven't attacked, at least. But there have been cases where I've been shocked where they actually bind, so don't expect them to never want to bind, because some decks just actually do like the bind zone. Next, we have the one of Brahma. Never use it. I don't use this card in practicality. It's just here to fill up the G zone, and I don't even feel like reading the effect. For the last 3 cards, we have a tech option, Conquering Supreme Dragon Volt Tech Zapper Dragon, Thunderstrike of 5, I think. Nope, Thunderstrike of 3. The Thunderstrike of 3, when he attacks a Vanguard, he gets plus 10, and then he also gets red text for counterblast 1. At the end of the battle, it attacked. You can, retire or bind? For every 2 cards in your opponent's bind zone, your opponent chooses his or her rear guards and retires and binds them face up. So he's just kind of there as a tech option. No one really plays him, but I think he's neat. Next, the newly limited to 1 Stunverse is a Narukami deck. You play Stunverse, you Soul Blast, act on Vanguard, you Soul Blast 1, turn a card from the G zone face up, and then you put him back into the G zone as well. So that means it's really good in Vermilion, because you get to still use Vermilion that same turn. Your opponent chooses 4 cards from each her rearguard and drop, and then binds them. Then, for every 4 cards in your opponent's binds one, you draw, and then your opponent discards one. Everyone should know Stunverse by now. If you need more in-depth explanation of this, feel free to look at the wiki or Google or something. I'm not sure. But Stunverse, you want to play Stunverse if you're playing Narukami. It's recently dropped down in price, so take it while you can. And last is Aeroth Dragon. This is Drachma. He, instead of a regular if you don't know what a Aeroth Dragon is, a Aeroth Dragon has a different kind of stride cost called Ultimate Stride, where you have to use the same name as the Vanguard you're currently on as the stride cost, as well as you have to have used or have faced up 3 cards in the G zone before you can actually play him. Because if you use him and then you don't win that turn, your entire G zone gets removed from the game, which sucks. So this is a last ditch effort for if you're in this scenario where this comes up. But a counterblast of 2. When it's placed on the Vanguard, you can pay the cost, and if you do, retire all of your opponent's units, bind them face up. Your opponent chooses three cards from his or her hand and discards them. Not discards all of them, but chooses 3 cards from their hand, discards 2, and then rides 1 card from among them on the Vanguard as stand. And if they don't actually have cards in their hand, they pick from the soul, and if they don't have anything in the soul, you win the game. But you don't really use this ever, but there's a scenario, or if you want to be funny, you can use them. But just keep in mind, if you don't win that turn, your G zone goes away forever, for that game at least. Then we just have 5 Excel markers and a quick shield, because quick shield is good. All right, that was the Vermilion deck list. I hope you enjoyed. And yep, that was all. Have a good day.